seriously popular.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to MAGA Land. Hey Germania, how are you?
I am very confused about everything that's happening, so we gotta break it all down today.
Yep, there's certainly been a lot of craziness in MAGA land as today is April 9, which is Trump's Tariff Activation Day. So his ominous tariffs have all gone into effect today, and he's still working on some deals with some countries. So we're watching that all unfold in real time, which is a little bit wild. Last night, Trump shared some of the details behind the scenes into his negotiations with the world's top leaders. China is striking back with a massive retaliation against the United States, and even Meghan Markle is weighing in on Trump's tariffs. And of course, the MAGA civil war is continuing on between Elon Musk and Peter Navarro as tariffs looks to divide some of Trump's closest allies. And Trump is up to a few other items outside of the tariffs debacle. He signed a coal executive order. And finally, we did hear from Second Lady Usha Vance as she opened up about what it's like to be an Indian American woman in a bleached-blonde MAGAverse. We'll have all of that and more coming up right after this break.
If you like this episode, we think you'll love this.
Hello, I'm Richard Coles, and this is The Apple and the Tree, a podcast where a parent and an adult child have the sort of intimate and revealing conversations we all wish we could have, but somehow we don't.
Getting back to the hospital, your mum giving birth, and then me holding you in my hand, and you could just fit in the palm of my hand.
We record mostly in our guests' own homes. It's almost as if you've been invited in to share in a very real and very heartfelt conversation. That's The Apple and the Tree. It's out now, available wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome to MAGA Land.
So everyone, today is finally the day we have been waiting. I guess it's officially Liberation Day. I feel like there's been several Liberation Days by now, but this really is the last deadline that had been set by the Trump administration for all these tariffs to go on. And as expected, other countries are fighting back. I think the case with China particularly is top of mind today. Here's where I'm confused, Kelly. Is the number 180% on Chinese goods? How did we get there? There's been so many numbers thrown around. I know that at one point it was 34%. Then they retaliated with the same tariffs. And then we upped it another 80-something%. And now we're at over 100%. What is going on?
Yeah, it's a little confusing, but basically what happened is yesterday, because Trump didn't get a deal with China, he raised 104% tariff, encompassing all his previous threats and new ones from yesterday. So 104% tariff went into effect on China overnight at midnight. Then China this morning retaliated and raised duties on U.S. goods to 84%. So that's a massive escalation in the trade war. And it shows that China doesn't want to back down. Trump's not backing down. So we're kind of stuck in a what's going to happen next type situation because it doesn't look like there's going to be a deal with Beijing on the table. And Trump said amid all of this that Americans shouldn't be worried. He wrote on Truth Social saying, be cool. He said, now is actually a great time to spend your money. He was saying that Americans should be looking forward to an economic boom that's going to happen, in part because of his big budget that's going through the House of Representatives right now, and it could be passed later today. So Trump has a very positive spin on everything that's going on, because as we know, the markets this morning opened lower than we've seen before. Americans, according to fresh new polls, are totally against tariffs. A new poll put out by Reuters had them at 57% opposed. And what's notable in that poll is that 25% of Republicans are against tariffs, which isn't a good sign for Trump, especially if he's losing support among his MAGA base because of this. So a lot of moving parts going on today as we see the tariffs actually roll out. And then as world leaders are groveling and trying to strike a deal with Trump, as he said last night at a big speech he was giving at the NRCC dinner, is that all these leaders are trying to kiss his butt. Let's take a listen to that.
I'm telling you, these countries are calling us up, kissing my ass. They are dying to make a deal. Please, sir, make a deal. I'll do anything. I'll do anything, sir. And then I'll see some rebel Republican, some guy that wants to grandstand, say, I think that Congress should take over negotiations. Let me tell you, you don't negotiate like I negotiate.
Germania, do you think that's what's going down?
Clearly not. I think, as I've said before, he can bully most countries and most topics, but I do think China has some leverage here. Again, once these tariffs go into effect, people are going to feel them. And I think China knows that. We're going to be talking about how they have been campaigning, kind of making Americans look dumb with the stereotype of the fat American at a factory. I did want to note, though, that Trump is there saying, Congress should never do these negotiations because they can't negotiate like I can. I think it's interesting that Trump and the Chinese Communist Party are they can unilaterally say what's going to go on with these tariffs. Meanwhile, the European Union yesterday, like a more normal democratic institution, had to vote for everyone to decide how they were going to respond to the tariffs. They did vote to respond. However, I think it's China here that truly has the power to fight back. I don't think they're kissing Trump's ass. I think maybe countries like Vietnam maybe are more willing to strike a deal. I think China has leverage here. I've seen, again, all experts, I don't know about numbers, but many experts are saying there's no part of the U.S. economy that would not be affected in a negative way by the tariffs that China is putting forward.
Yeah, it looks like Amazon has already started canceling some orders on goods coming from China because of the cost and the back and forth that we've seen between Trump and Xi Jinping. So we'll keep an eye on how much goods actually go up. I think we discussed this in the past, but we probably won't see an actual price increase for a few weeks at least as these slowly start trickling down. And on the other hand, the White House has been touting that tariffs already, including those that we saw last week that already went into effect on the auto industry, they've already raised billions in dollars in revenue for the United States. So the White House is really focusing on that messaging. They're focusing on how Trump is being able to come to the table and strike deals with some of these world leaders. And they aren't as heavily looking into sort of the massive fallout on the retail side that we're expecting to see in the coming weeks.
Kelly, I'm really interested just as a young person, and I think it sounds silly, but once we start seeing that the prices of stores that Americans have become really reliant on, stores like Shein, Temu. I always talk about Cider, these Instagram stores that give you cute clothing, certainly not the best quality, but the prices are unbeatable. And 1,000% the women around the country, I'm waiting for that because that hasn't happened yet. And I want to see how it will happen. Will these outlets I've seen already some stores are adding the tariffs. So making it clear in the breakdown of cost in your receipt, how much more you're paying because of Trump tariffs. So I'm super interested in seeing that. But I wanted to talk about, because China's not only fighting with tariffs, they're fighting, as they do very well, with propaganda and a war of information. The Chinese Communist Party this week shared a video of Ronald Reagan speaking about how great capitalism and the free market are and the dangers of tariffs. This is the Communist Party of China that's trolling Americans with a video of Ronald Reagan. They're also trolling us with memes, AI memes that show, the stereotypical Wally American that's obese and doesn't stand up and only drinks soda, and they're working at a factory. Why are they doing this? Because Trump and the MAGA populists say that they want to bring factories back to the US. They want working class Americans to be able to buy houses again. And Kelly, that's just not where the modern economy is anymore. People don't want to be in these factories. I wanted also to note, I think it's important, and how it differentiates Trump's first term from what he's doing now. He's gotten rid of the more traditional advisors like Gary Cohn, one of his financial advisors during his first term. And an anecdote of how Gary Cohn dealt with Trump is making the rounds online, and I wanted to share it because it's an insight into what Trump is doing now. Basically, he was trying to explain to the president why people don't want to go back to factories. The president kept saying, I don't get it. Cohn tried to explain, I can sit in a nice office with air conditioning and a desk or stand on my feet 8 hours a day. Which one would you do for the same pay? Cohn added, people don't want to stand in front of a 2,000-degree blast furnace. People don't want to go into coal mines and get black lung. Trump wasn't buying it. Several times, Cohn just asked the president, why do you have these views? Trump replied, I just do. I've had them for 30 years. So again, this is all connected. China's now trolling Americans because, again, we are the world's most powerful economy. We have moved beyond producing the goods to an economy that relies on innovation, Silicon Valley, creating. No, Trump wants to bring it back to we're building the things with our hands.
Yeah, and I want to bring up on the EU retaliatory tariffs. I actually just pulled this up to get the latest. They are moving forward with retaliatory tariffs on the United States, which is pretty shocking considering the EU is the United States' probably closest allies. And they basically said that the target of the tariffs would be about $23 billion worth of U.S. goods. So that's a pretty substantial clapback. And Elon Musk had actually warned Trump against going so hard against the EU. And Trump seemingly ignored him and upped the ante, and now they're firing back. So that's one that I think is really interesting to keep an eye on, because this is sort of putting Elon and Trump at odds with one another, at least publicly. And it's sort of the first major clash that we've seen. He talked a little bit about his clash with Peter Navarro, Trump's trade rep, but now it seems as though Elon and Trump are directly butting heads on the tariffs. Elon's lost, I think, over $10 billion since last week, and this all went down. So he's really being impacted by it personally. He's still the world's richest man. It's still not a hard life, but for his own businesses, I think he's trying to promote what's best for Tesla and his other companies so that they get the best deal. And so kind of puts him in this weird position compared to some of the other Trump allies who don't have, massive companies, massive markets that they're looking.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because this is what Trump's smart allies do when they want to criticize him, right? They put it on his advisors. And that's what Elon Musk has been doing with Peter Navarro, who he straight up called truly a moron on Twitter this week, saying that he's just lying about his justification for the tariffs. Of course, it's interesting because the White House press secretary was asked about this as we're all in the media watching this MAGA war, and she had an interesting response. Let's take a listen.
There's been some public sparring between Elon Musk and the president's trade advisor, Peter Navarro, on some of these tariffs. Musk actually referred to Navarro today as being, quote, dumber than a sack of bricks. Are you at all, or is the administration, the president, all concerned that this is maybe impacting the public's understanding of these tariffs? It might be messing with the message on it?
No, look, these are obviously two individuals who have very different views on trade and on tariffs. Boys will be boys, and we will let their public sparring continue. And you guys should all be very grateful that we have the most transparent administration in history.
Boys will be boys. That's what Caroline says. It's true, but it's shocking that that's her response to one of the most public feuds between Trump advisors that we've seen so far. It seems like she's trying to just brush it under the rug, not draw a lot of attention to it, saying some tension, some discussion can be good to the outcome of the American people. But I think what's most striking about this is that Trump's team isn't united and they're not cohesive on a message, especially at a time that's very volatile, very precarious for Americans who are worried about their 401ks, who are looking at their balances online and their banking and seeing a steep decline. And so I think there needs to be more reassurance coming from the White House, which Trump tried to do on Truth Social, but he just had a few quick posts. I think in his speech last night, he tried to be sort of the big man on campus showing strength. But I think Americans are still a little worried about how this is going to play out in the short and the long term. And notably, Senator Ted Cruz actually said last night on Hannity that he would advise Trump to stop listening to his own advisors because they're not giving him good advice on how to message on this issue. And they don't have a good answer for whether this is a short-term or a long-term tariff situation. And he says this can't really be a long-term solution for Americans because it's just going to be a never-ending battle with the markets. And we've already seen so much fallout and the market dive, et cetera. So I think it all comes back to we need to see more of Caroline on the podium. She needs to come back this week again. I think we need to see Trump doing another direct address to the nation, maybe even an Oval Office address where he really explains how this is going to impact Americans in the short term, but why it's better in the long term. And then we need to just see sort of like his team getting behind him and messaging on the same front.
Yeah. This is not going to cut it. And again, things haven't even started getting bad. The CEO of JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon, said today that all things are pointing to a recession, just adding to what the experts say. He did point out sometimes the stock market doesn't say exactly what's going to happen, but a lot of the times it does. And so once a recession hits, I think, the White House's message is going to have to start getting more serious than boys will be boys. But we'll be right back after this break with more MAGAland updates.
If you like this episode, we think you'll love this.
Hello, I'm Richard Coles, and this is The Apple and the Tree, a podcast where a parent and an adult child have the sort of intimate and revealing conversations we all wish we could have, but somehow we don't.
Getting back to the hospital, your mum giving birth, and then me holding you in my hand, and you could just fit in the palm of my hand.
We record mostly in our guests' own homes. It's almost as if you've been invited in to share in a very real and very heartfelt conversation. That's The Apple and the Tree. It's out now, available wherever you get your podcasts.
So despite the chaos in Wall Street and the uncertainty in the world's economy, Trump appeared to have an amazing time at the Republican National Congressional Committee. He was all dressed up. The hair was looking particularly fluffy, and he was really giving it out there with some of his biggest hits. I think he gave us a new nickname that we didn't know about. Adam, as he calls him, Shifty Schiff, who, as we know, was one of the leaders of the Russia probe against Trump, and thus is one of his biggest enemies. So Trump took a moment during his speech to acknowledge Representative Schiff. Let's take a look.
Adam Shifty Schiffs. Can you believe this guy? He's got the smallest neck I've ever seen. And the biggest head. We call him watermelon head. I'd say, how could that big fat face stand on a neck that looked like this finger? How can it? It was the weirdest thing. It's a mystery. Nobody can understand it. But he's one of the most dishonest human beings I've ever seen. And, you know, how we can allow people like that to run an office is a shame, but we did. He was in charge of the witch hunt. You know, he was in charge of the fake witch hunt with Russia. It was a made-up story.
Again, I find it fascinating that Trump has so much to think about for sure, but yet he is amused at the size of a congressman's neck when compared to his head, and cannot believe that someone with this neck and head combination is elected to the U.S. Congress.
Yeah, Trump loves to go after Adam Schiff. He continuously did this on the campaign trail. We've heard him call him pencil neck, shifty shift. I mean, Adam Schiff was the leader of the impeachment probe against him, and they will never get along. And so this new nickname, Watermelon Head, is interesting. And now Schiff is actually a senator, so he's even more powerful, arguably.
Which is crazy because I would say Representative Schiff is one of the people responsible for a second Trump term and how they acted during the first one.
Yeah, exactly. And Schiff also is one of the Democrats that we're seeing kind of like flail about and not know how to respond to Trump now that he's back in office. And he is one of the leading Democrats. So you would expect to see him step up and try to pave the way forward on the pushback.
But the Democrats face no consequences for failure. This guy has continued to fail up. Now he's a senator, continues to have power. And as you said, he's just, again, when Trump brings them up, you know they're not good for the party. But another of Trump's greatest hits about another big move. He wants again to go back to an economy that we thought we were trying to move away from. He wants coal back. And he spoke about this during his speech, making fun of windmills and people who have homes near them. Let's take a listen.
Between that and windmills, you can have windmills too. Most expensive form of energy ever. Anybody have a windmill by your house? Congratulations, you'll never sell your house. And today I signed historic executive orders to unleash coal production to the highest levels ever. Because, you know, coal is the most powerful thing. We have more of it than any. We have more liquid gold under our feet, oil and gas. And we have more coal than any other country. No other country has as much as we have. All different forms of coal. And take a look at China. They're building 2 coal plants a week. Think of that, 2 a week. We are screwing around with wind. Oh, wind. These people are crazy. They say, oh, it's great for the environment. Yeah, it kills all your birds.
Always a real estate guy, no?
He has this weird fascination with windmills, and he brings it up actually quite frequently. And he also said in the past that it like kills whales and all these other kind of weird tangents related to windmills. But he is going after Democrats who champion green energy and who work to promote Biden's agenda, including rolling back coal. I think it's smart for him to enact this executive order, especially because in the Rust Belt states, which are traditionally swing states, including Pennsylvania, coal is such a pivotal industry there. So he is leaning all in on this. His energy secretary, Chris Wright, has also been promoting coal, meeting with coal miners. So this was something that we saw Trump talk about on the campaign trail. Now he's making good on it. It was kind of fun to see the group of coal miners who were assembled at the White House and with their hard hats and their gear, you know, working with Trump, because that's sort of, we always talk about the juxtaposition of Trump, right? Like he is a rich man, real estate mogul, but then he's also able to relate so well with coal miners and blue collar workers. And it is, you know, a gift that he has to be able to do that. So he was leaning into that last night. And I think it definitely wins him points with the everyday American blue collar worker. He also tried to assure them on tariffs during this speech as well, saying that it's going to be good for them, good for the coal mining industry, et cetera.
Yeah, definitely. That's Trump's magic. And it's always fascinating that he's able to relate to everyday Americans better than other politicians who didn't grow up as wealthy as he did. It's really a charisma that he has. However, again, China's making fun of us for making our focus in the greatest nation on earth. Now we're going to go back to coal. So we continue to regress. But we had a lot of federal judges' decisions and Supreme Court decisions as well. Again, a really hard part of keeping up with what's going on in MAGA land is that Trump is issuing these orders at the same time that federal judges are blocking them, and then other judges are acting differently, and then it reaches the Supreme Court. But as of now, a federal judge has said that the White House's punishment of the Associated Press is unconstitutional, and thus they are allowed back in the room. Has the Trump administration responded to this in any way, or what's going to happen there?
So last night, the AP tried to get into the pool that was going to Trump's speech at the NRCC, and the White House denied them. So that happened after the ruling. So they're continuing on the same path. This is sort of the beginning of the court case. So this will snake its way through and probably be years long in the making. So if a lower court decided this, obviously Trump's going to take it to the next level and they'll make their way through the appeals. So I don't think this really will have an impact on the AP day to day, although some of those media organizations were cheering this development in the courts. And it is notable that it was a Trump appointed judge that ruled on the side of the Associated Press.
Interesting. Well, on that note, Trump did have a good week with the Supreme Court.
So if you recall, there was a migrant who was deported back to El Salvador who was accused of being in MS-13. It seems there was some sort of clerical error. He might not have been in MS-13, but it's still a little murky. So Supreme Court Chief Justice Roberts ruled that the court order ordering this man back to his home in the United States should be put on pause while they figure out what's going on. So it's still in limbo, but he is still in El Salvador. He's not coming back to the United States at this point. His wife actually is holding a rally on Capitol Hill today in his defense, tearing into Trump, saying this is an error that should be remedied. So that should be interesting. Some fireworks expected there, but it is a win for Trump, a small win, but we'll see how it unfolds.
By the way, the Trump administration has now admitted that 90% of the migrants that were sent to El Salvador did not have any criminal records. Their only crime was being in the U.S. without documents.
There was also another Supreme Court win for Trump this week that said his order basically firing thousands of federal employees should be able to go through. A lower court had paused it, but that is going through. So DOJ is able to continue its work on that front, and some of those bureaucrats will continue to go through the exit process.
We'll keep watching the courts because I think the Supreme Court is going to have the busiest presidential term they've ever had. But we like to close off our show with some lighter MAGAland news. And this I was fascinated about because finally Second Lady Usha Vance has opened up in her first interview as Second Lady of the United States. I thought it was interesting, Kelly, the outlet that she gave the interview to, the Free Press, because there's this mystery surrounded the Second Lady because she also worked at a progressive law firm. So I think a lot of people might think that she's not as right-wing as the most right-wing parts of the MAGA movement. Of course, she's the first Second Lady who is a Hindu and an Indian American. So I think there are a lot of questions about how she really feels about Trump and the administration. But there's a certain look that the MAGA ladies have that we have discussed here. They're very blonde, have a lot of makeup, and Usha Vance is a more laid-back personality. And of course, the Free Press asked her about that. And she said something like, I know what MAGA thinks about my gray hair. I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, she admitted that she doesn't have really the fashion sense as some of these MAGA ladies with the bleached blonde hair have. And she's a little bit of an outsider on that front, but she said she doesn't think Americans really care about how she looks, and that's not really her focus. She's extremely impressive. And she actually clerked for Chief Justice John Roberts at the Supreme Court. And then she also clerked for now Justice Brett Kavanaugh, but when he was on the Court of Appeals in D.C. So she is very conservative, arguably. She may have had some time in the private sector for a more progressive firm. I don't have the details on that, but
on Kavanaugh, though, I love that part, and it gave me an educated theory because if you remember, J.D. Vance and Usha, the article says it, for a while they were kind of not really saying what they were, and progressives loved him after his book. From the outside, looked like a progressive dream. They lived in California. He was working with Peter Thiel. It seems there was a moment of inflection when Justice Brett Kavanaugh was accused of sexual assault during his confirmation hearing. The article says that that really upset the Vances and particularly Usha. So it does seem to me like there was a rejection to what we were used to, this cancellation culture that became so prevalent over the last years. And she also made a point to mention, I encountered Trump voters and they are not the caricature of the far right that people want to make them out to be. She said they accept me as a brown woman, as a Hindu, and clearly, as you said, she is the most qualified second lady ever. And what an amazing asset for JD Vance if he does run for being president, because the racism allegations, the white supremacy stuff just isn't going to stick as well when the candidate has children who are Indian American.
Mm-hmm.
But Kelly, I also have to go on with the MAGA ladies because Kristi Noem, I mean, at this point, this is offensive to me because the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security continues going on ICE raids dressed like an ICE Barbie. But this one was particularly ridiculous because she really was there posing with ICE and pointing a huge gun at an officer's head.
Yeah, she was not holding the gun correctly, and it was unsafe in the position that she was holding it. I'm not really sure how this came about, but I want to know what was going on inside that agent's mind during this video, photo op, whatever was going on, because it was pretty shocking. And you would think she would know how to hold a gun properly, especially because she admitted to killing her own dog, which is so crazy.
There it is. There it is. We had to bring it up. That's why, what was it that Trump was considering her for? Vice president, was it?
Yeah.
And because she really admitted to killing a puppy, she was not going to be a vice president, but she's really enjoying her role. What I would like to see is a get ready with me, ICE Barbie, before I go detain immigrants, because there's a lot of hair extensions. There's a lot of makeup. This is a whole operation from this government official that I'm not sure should be spending her time doing this type of thing. But that's the state of MAGAland today. Until next time here in Welcome to MAGAland.
Bye.
If you like this episode, we think you'll love this.
Hello, I'm Richard Coles, and this is The Apple and the Tree, a podcast where a parent and an adult child have the sort of intimate and revealing conversations we all wish we could have, but somehow we don't.
Getting back to the hospital, your mum giving birth, and then me holding you in my hand, and you could just fit in the palm of my hand.
We record mostly in our guests' own homes. It's almost as if you've been invited in to share in a very real and very heartfelt conversation. That's The Apple and the Tree. It's out now, available wherever you get your podcasts.